Chapter 105. Subduing through force. Li Qingshan smiled silently. He did not admit it, nor did he deny it. The sacred church Xianxia said, "Black Wolf Guard Feng Zhang also died to your hands?" Originally, he never would have believed something as ridiculous as that. A Black Wolf Guard, 5 first-rate masters, and a large group of second- and third-rate masters would all die to a nameless kid. However, he believed it a little now. Li Qingshan still did not answer. Yen Song drew his hand back. There were no talismans in his hand. Li Qingshan smiled. "Are we not going to fight anymore?" Yen Song said, "You're dead for sure. There's no need for me to waste things on a dead person." Li Qingshan said, "Oh? What do you mean?" Yen Song said, "Do you think you can still live after killing a Black Wolf Guard?" Li Qingshan did not deny it. "There's no need for you to worry about that. Please hand over my things." Yen Song paled. Lu Hong went up and pulled Li Qingshan to one side. He pleaded, "Qingshan, I didn't know you were still alive, which was why I dug those things out. If you want silver, I'll give it to you, all right?" Li Qingshan laid out his hands. "That's what I was thinking." He wanted to reason with them, but what could he do when they would always be unreasonable, insisting on talking with their fists? Lu Hong shot a glance at them, and the Iron Fist disciples dispersed everyone. The large stadium emptied out. At this moment, Yidachuan arrived in a palanquin. When he saw everyone's expressions and the red marks that had yet to fade from Yen Song's face, he already had a rough idea of what had happened. He felt great inside. A few days ago, they had organized a banquet for Yen Song, but this damn protector had been so condescending. Now he knew how powerful he was. He coughed pretentiously. "Protector Yen, do you have some sort of misunderstanding with Sheriff Li? As the saying goes, it's better to squash enmity than keep it alive. I'll play the host this afternoon and act as a peacemaker for the two of you." "The sacred church." Yen Song interrupted him. "There's no need. I have nothing to say to a dead person." Li Qingshan said, "Say that again." "A defeated general actually dares to be so arrogant. Do you really think I don't dare to be ruthless?" Yen Song snorted coldly, but did not dare to speak again. As the saying goes, the situation is stronger than the person. Yidachuan asked curiously, "What dead person?" After understanding the whole story, he was indeed worried about Li Qingshan. Li Long whispered, "Qing'an, you should leave quickly." Yen Song coldly stared at him. Li Qingshan sneered in his heart. "Do you really think that I don't have long to live?" He said indifferently, "I just happen to be going to Jiaping City to join the Hawkwolf Guard." "What?" Everyone was shocked. "What a joke." Yen Song sneered. He wanted to say, but when he thought about how powerful Li Qingshan really was, he could only snort disdainfully. Yidachuan said, "What's going on?" Li Qingshan said, "Old Wang of the Red Eagle Commander wants me to report to Zhuozhibua at Jiaping City." Yen Song cried out, "How's that possible? You killed Feng Zhang, so you're a sworn enemy of the Hawkwolf Guard." Yidachuan said, Is that true?" Li Qingshan took out the Black Wolf Waste tablet and waved it around. "Feng Zhang has already been expelled from the Hawkwolf Guard. You can basically say that I'm taking over his position." Maintaining a low profile was a lurking wild beast. It was for the sake of hunting down prey at a crucial moment, rather than allowing some clown to look down on him and look down on him. In the end, it would lead to a whole lot of trouble. That would not be maintaining a low profile, but foolishness. If you lowered yourself to the ground, you could not blame others for stepping on you. Displaying sufficient strength and might was the only way to reduce trouble. Lu Hong and Li Long exchanged glances. Neither of them said anything. Just what kind of luck was this? Half a year ago, Li Qingshan was still a country bumpkin, only able to contend with ruffians and scoundrels. Now, he could already join the Hawkwolf Guard that struck fear into the hearts of people of the Jianghu. He had basically risen through the heavens. Li Qingshan was at ease. Yen Song refused to believe it, but he had to believe it. After coming to Qingyang, he asked around and also learned that the person who took away Li Qingshan in the restaurant that day was the Scarlet Wolf Commander, Hua Sengzan. He took Feng Zhang and Li Qingshan to see Wang Pushi. He could not understand why the two of them would come to such a crappy place, but the outcome was very clear. In the end, Li Qingshan returned, but Feng Zhang died a violent death. The two of them did not help their own man, Feng Zhang. The meaning behind this was thought-provoking, but it was very clear now. Wang Puxi had actually expelled Feng Zhang on the spot, while Li Qingshan actually referred to Wang Puxi as Old Wang. Was he connected to Wang Puxi somehow? When he looked at Li Qingshan again, his gaze had already changed. Originally, he thought that even if the Hawkwolf Guard did not come looking for Li Qingshan, he would still find a way to protect him, but he could not help but give up on this thought now. In this world, only the Hawkwolf Guard would take revenge on others. Who would be bold enough to take revenge on the Hawkwolf Guard? The more he thought about it, the more he regretted being too rash. The other party was so young, yet he was already so powerful. Furthermore, he was able to escape from such a dangerous situation. Who knew what kind of person was standing behind him? How could he really treat him like an ordinary kid? Fantastic! Yi Dachuan was overjoyed. I was originally worried that you wouldn't be able to go to Jiaping. You can come with me now. Li Qingshan said, I'm still considering whether I should go or not. Yi Dachuan said, why wouldn't you? Joining the Hawkwolf Guard is great. You don't even have to pay to go to the brothels or gambling dens. Li Qingshan sweated slightly. So this was the benefit of joining the Hawkwolf Guard? If Old Wang were here, he might just smack you to death with a metal ruler. Yi Dachuan said, it's getting late. Let's go. Let's talk while we eat. Why would Lu Hong let Yi Dachuan make the arrangements? He had already made his disciples prepare everything. Yen Song's expression changed for a while before he actually sat down as well. He no longer said anything. I have nothing to say to a dead man. Afterwards, Yi Dachuan and Lu Hong mediated between the two. After a few cups, Yen Song used his tipsiness to find a way out of the situation. He clinked his cup with Li Qingshan and said awkwardly, young hero Li. He could no longer pursue the matter regarding Hall Chief Wu. Even their main branch leader would scold him for offending a Hawkwolf Guard over a hall chief. Li Qingshan smiled. Protector Yen, just now, I've offended you. I'll punish myself with 3 cups to apologize to you. He downed all the alcohol in his cup before drinking 3 more. He had no reason, nor did he want to fall out with others. It would obviously be for the best if it could be resolved. There was a series of praises from the table, and Yen Song's complexion eased up a lot. Lu Hong said, we're all people of the Jianghu, so we're all hot-tempered. Bumping into each other is completely normal, but as the saying goes, it's better to squash enmity than to keep it alive. Isn't it better to make friends than to make enemies? I've lived for so long, and although my martial arts are nothing special, I've relied on this cultivation method to live out my remaining years in peace. Yi Dachuan said, Yeah. That's the principle. They all secretly praised Li Qingshan's sense of propriety. He relied on his strength but did not intimidate the weak. His conduct was nothing like a 16-year-old teenager. The two of them were both experienced in battle, so they were first-rate at livening up the atmosphere. With Li Qingshan's attitude, they chimed in one after another, and the atmosphere became harmonious. Yen Song shamelessly asked about Li Qingshan's relationship with Wang Puxi, which was also something everyone was curious about. For a moment, none of them said anything, only looking at Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan did not want to assume the might of a tiger. So that old Wang is called Wang Puxi. I'm not familiar with him. Everyone was disappointed, but Yen Song refused to believe it. Wang Puxi doesn't know you, so why would he take such good care of you and expel Feng Zhang for you? Then he asked, the two of them are usually elusive in Qingyang City, so why have they come to Qingyang City? Li Qingshan had no intention of hiding anything either. He roughly explained the matter of Gu Yenying, but he hid the topic of the Dark Queen and the Cat Demon. The White Hawk Commander. The Bodhi Brew. Yen Song gulped. To him, that was a figure of legend. Their power and authority were so great that he could not even imagine it. And the renowned Bodhi Brew. Only their main branch leader was fortunate enough to drink a cup of it. The slight doubt he originally had was completely dispelled. He could completely imagine just how furious he would be if an insensible subordinate held him back when he wanted to curry up to the main branch leader. Qingshan, your future prospects are limitless now that you've caught the eye of Commander Gu. Just now, his resentment from being slapped in the face by Li Qingshan was immediately swept away. When he looked at Li Qingshan again, there was even a hint of respect in his gaze. He was like a petty bureaucrat who had heard that a certain colleague of his had been received by the leader of the country, and they had even conversed in a friendly manner. He could not help but feel deep veneration. What was the point of fussing over these small grievances? Perhaps. Li Qingshan discovered that from top to bottom, Iron Fist was very adaptable to the circumstances, but he felt rather mixed inside. The woman in snow-white clothes that seemed extraordinarily carefree had only invited him to a cup of alcohol, yet she had completely changed the opinion of an innate master. It also made him realize the difference between them. Yi Dechuan sucked in a deep breath. That's one of the 3 pillars of the Rui Commandery. He had spent many years in the prefectural city of Clear River. Although he was neither skilled in the arts nor in the martial arts, he was very familiar with the gossip and rumors on the streets. Li Qingshan asked in surprise, "What are the 3 pillars of the Rui Commandery?" Yen Song said, "The Marquis of Rui, Jiang Fu, the White Hawk Commander, Gu Yenying, and the Great General Han Anghua. They belong to the schools of Moism, legalism, and the military respectively. Jiang Fu manages government affairs and commands the 9 prefectures. Gu Yenying manages the Hawkwolf Guard and is in charge of punishment and supervision. Han Anghua commands the army of the Han family and is in charge of military authority. Every single one of them is a figure of great authority. They're commonly referred to as the 3 pillars of the Rui Commandery. I heard that among them, Commander Gu has the greatest background." Yi Dechuan said, "Even if we don't compare their backgrounds, the Hawkwolf Guard is responsible for supervising the officers of the army. This Commander Gu is the one that no one dares to provoke the least. Qingshan, if you can get a promotion from her, you'll immediately rise up." Li Qingshan silently memorized this information. As it turned out, the Hawkwolf Guard belonged to the school of legalism. Those who originated from the school of Confucianism and the school of the military were probably not the scholar Qiuba. How could someone who stood on par with Gu Yenying be a regular person? The waters of this world were basically unfathomable. But of course, most people would never have the opportunity to come into contact with any of the 3 in their entire lives. At the same time, he also felt that reconciling with Yen Song was the correct decision. Although having more friends did not necessarily mean having more paths, he definitely knew a lot of information that he did not know about since he came from the prefectural city of Clear River. This information was extremely important to him, even directly related to whether he wanted to go to Jiaping City or not. Chapter 106. The 10th layer of Qi practitioner Li Qingshan gained a better understanding of the structure of the government. This was basically a separation of 3 powers. Although it seemed very crude, that was because it was just too vast, so it was impossible to govern it in a meticulous manner. The Holy Church among them, the Hawkwolf Guard, was rather similar to the Ming Dynasty's 2 ministries and 1 guard. They even possessed a little more authority. He could not help but say, "So the Hawkwolf Guard is actually so impressive." Yi Dechuan said, "Yeah, so don't hesitate. A great future awaits you." Yen Song said, "Eating, drinking, whoring, and gambling for free is a small matter. If you become a Hawkwolf Guard, you'll still lack that bit of money, Qingshan. You don't seem like someone who craves power either, but the Hawkwolf Guard has many spiritual artifacts, spiritual stones, pills, and cultivation methods. There probably isn't a single Qi practitioner who wouldn't be interested." Li Qingshan said, "Qi practitioners? Then what are innate masters?" Li Qingshan asked for guidance modestly, so Yen Song calmed down even more. He was willing to be a beacon of light. Moreover, this was only common knowledge. As it turned out, there were extremely few people in the world who could cultivate true Qi right from the start. They were so-called Qi practitioners. However, the requirement for talent to become a Qi practitioner was extremely high. Most people could not take this path. However, there was another path, which was to cultivate inner force. Inner force basically had no rigid requirements for talent. As long as they were not idiots and were willing to put in the effort, basically anyone could cultivate inner force. The inner force that regular cultivators practiced was equivalent to a simplified, weakened version of qi methods. It lowered the requirement for talent, making it easier for them to grasp the basics. Basically anyone could practice it, but the inner force they produced was nowhere close to the effects of true qi. That was because they had not truly opened up their meridians. Inner force would be bound by the meridians, unable to nourish the organs, much less leave the body. However, as long as they cultivated their inner force to the limit and made a breakthrough, they could convert it into true qi and become a qi practitioner, which was also commonly known as an innate master. The path of practicing qi was divided into 10 layers in total. Moreover, it was not as crude as the division between first-rate and second-rate in Jianghu. Sometimes, it was very difficult to accurately say whether someone was a first-rate or a second-rate expert. This was because the martial arts they practiced were different, and the effects of their martial arts varied greatly. The paths they took were also very different. However, in the Tao of Qi refinement, no matter what kind of technique one cultivated, the goal was to clear the 8 extraordinary meridians, namely the Yang Heel Meridian, Yin Heel Meridian, Yang Linking Meridian, Yin Linking Meridian, Girdle Meridian, Chong Meridian, Ren Meridian, and Du Meridian. These 8 meridians were not directly connected to the lungs, nor did they coordinate with the inside and outside of the body. Therefore, they were called the extraordinary meridians. Each meridian connected the entire body, connecting several major acupoints. With each meridian connected, one's Zhenqi would grow a little stronger, and that would be a realm higher. Once the 8 extraordinary meridians were completely connected, one would reach the 9th layer of qi refinement. If he wanted to reach the 10th layer, it would be even more difficult. He needed to completely connect the 12 standard meridians, which were the 3 yin meridians of the hand, the 3 yang meridians of the hand, the 3 yin meridians of the foot, and the 3 yang meridians of the foot. These 12 meridians intersected with one another, connecting the hands, feet, lungs, and the 5 elements. It was extremely easy for him to suffer from qi deviation and damage his lungs. However, if he could overcome this, he would reach the great perfection of the 10th layer of qi refinement and reach the peak of qi practitioners. However, Li Qingshan had not even connected a single meridian as he walked the path of the demons. There were no such things as meridians at all. There were all sorts of demons, and there were very few that were similar to humans. Could you ask a snake or a piece of bamboo to have the 8 extraordinary meridians? However, when he thought up to there, another thought appeared in his head. After suppressing the ox demon and tiger demon with the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression, he was truly a human now. He had returned to his original state. Was it really impossible for him to practice qi? As it seemed, he needed to find a method for practicing qi and try it out. With this thought, he embarked on an even stranger and unique path. When he reached there, Yen Song even grumbled about how the status of people who practiced martial arts was just too low. This was because when he reached the innate realm and could practice qi, he was already quite old. Although he had converted his profound inner force into true qi and opened his Yang Heel Meridian, breaking through to the 2nd layer, he was unable to take another step forward and open his Yin Heel Meridian, breaking through to the 3rd layer. Everyone comforted him. Yen Song said, "Practicing the body is powerful, but it's not the right path at the end of the day. Qingshan, you're so young, so you'll definitely be able to reach the 3rd layer, or even the 4th or 5th layer. If you can open your girdle meridian and condense a sea of qi, reaching the 6th layer, you'll have the right to be promoted to a Scarlet Wolf Guard. You'll be able to hold a post in the prefectural city of Clear River." Yen Song's insight was sharp. He could tell that it was impossible for Li Qingshan's true qi to reach the 2nd layer, yet he was able to defeat him so easily. That meant Li Qingshan had taken the path of practicing the body. From a certain perspective, the external martial arts of the Jianghu were simplified versions of practicing the body. However, practicing the body was the same as practicing the external martial arts of the Jianghu. It was powerful in the early stages, but it had no future. It was very difficult to reach higher realms of cultivation, so it was not valued. Li Qingshan said, "Thank you for your warning, Protector Yen. I will pay attention in the future." However, as a demon, it was impossible for him not to practice the body. However, with that, the situation before him became much clearer. He wondered what layer of Qi practitioner he could rival as a demon. As a Black Hawk commander, Zhuo Zhibua of Jiaping City was roughly at the level of a low-level Scarlet Wolf Guard. He was roughly at the 6th layer and had condensed a sea of Qi. Although he did not know whether a human who had condensed a sea of Qi or a demon who had refined a demon core was more powerful, the difference should not be too great. At the very least, he would be able to escape. As a result, he made up his mind to pay a visit to Jiaping City. As the saying went, cultivation in the 6 doors of fans was good. The resources there were indeed tempting him. Li Qingshan then asked, "Protector Yen, do you have any methods for practicing Qi?" Yen Song said awkwardly, "Methods for practicing Qi are a secret among the sects and clans. They are not taught to outsiders." Li Qingshan also knew that his question was rather abrupt. He had just reconciled with someone, so asking for a method for practicing Qi was rather inappropriate. He smiled and said, "My apologies for being abrupt." He drank a cup of wine and said no more. Yen Song thought about it for a while, troubled. "However, if you really want it, then I can only reluctantly accept it." Li Qingshan was overjoyed. He toasted Yen Song a few more times, while Yi Dechuan and Lu Hong congratulated him as well. Li Long revealed an extremely envious expression. He thought, sure enough, the strong are revered in this world. Li Qingshan had slapped this old man a few times, yet he had earned a method for practicing Qi instead. After the meal, Yen Song passed on a method for practicing Qi to Li Qingshan in a quiet room for practicing Qi. The name of the method was the innate method of practicing Qi. It was also split into 9 layers. However, practicing the 9th layer would only allow one to reach the 3rd layer of Qi practitioner. It was obvious that it was not some impressive method. Yen Song told him about this openly. This innate method of practicing Qi is only for laying down a foundation. With your talent, Qingshan, you will definitely be able to find a better method to practice in the future. Methods for practicing Qi were very valuable. They could make many people shed blood for them. However, they were not exactly valuable. In particular, basically everyone knew about the innate method of practicing Qi among Qi practitioners. Those who did not know about it were mostly because they had come into contact with better and stronger methods for forging artifacts right from the start. The most valuable thing was not the method, but the person who practiced it. Basically, as long as you had the talent for practicing Qi, there would be countless people in the world who would be willing to teach you this basic method for forging artifacts. As long as Li Qingshan joined the Hawkwolf Guard, he would obviously be able to obtain it. Yen Song could tell that Li Qingshan's future was limitless, so there was no harm in doing him a favor like this. "Thank you, Protector Yen." Li Qingshan's main objective was to see whether he could practice Qi or not. The quality of this cultivation method was a trivial matter. Moreover, although the power and advancement of a basic cultivation method like this would not be particularly great, it probably had the characteristic of being easy to grasp, which instead suited him the most. He had some other guesses. Were all abilities and cultivation methods divided into 9 layers? All the abilities and cultivation methods he practiced right now were all standard 9 layers. He had asked little and before, and even the path of white bone and great beauty was the same. Yen Song bid farewell and left, continuing to choose disciples. He left Li Qingshan to cultivate in the quiet room. In the quiet room, incense that could calm the mind burned. Li Qingshan sat with his legs crossed and his eyes closed. He silently comprehended the wonders of the innate method of practicing Qi. He had the experience of practicing Qi in the past, and he had even managed to condense true Qi to a relatively strong level. However, in the end, it was all for the sake of converting true Qi into demon Qi. Its final objective was to turn him into a demon. It was not a proper method of practicing Qi at all. Only now did he truly come into contact with the cultivation methods of human qi practitioners. After comprehending it, he discovered that it was much simpler than the abilities that Oxen had taught him. In particular, the first 3 layers did not even touch on any meridians. They only taught him how to sense and gather true qi. It was just like how a secondary school student would learn from a primary school student's textbooks. It was extremely simple. In less than 2 hours, Li Qingshan condensed another strand of true qi, demonstrating his extraordinary talent once again. At the very least, he had the right to practice qi. If he had been born in the prefectural city of Clear River, he probably would have been accepted as a disciple a long time ago, embarking on the path of a qi practitioner. However, before he could celebrate, the strand of true qi in the demon core was sucked in and converted into demon qi. Li Qingshan could not help but become dumbfounded. Was he wrong? He thought about it again and began practicing the spirit turtle's method of qi suppression. His mind remained still as he absorbed the spiritual qi of the world. 6 whole hours passed, and the demon qi in the demon core had almost reached saturation. Of course, even if he cultivated for another 60 hours, it would be impossible for him to truly saturate the demon core with demon qi. Li Qingshan practiced the innate method of practicing qi again, and the true qi he had condensed was devoured by the demon core again, converted into demon qi. However, there was still some left for him. However, he ravished with joy inside. This proved that his guess and choice were correct. He really could practice qi like a regular person. The sky gradually darkened. Li Qingshan cultivated persistently, gathering true qi bit by bit with great difficulty. He was like laborers under the cruel exploitation of the capitalists, toiling arduously. Most of the fruits of their labor were taken away from them. Of course, this great capitalist was still Li Qingshan himself, so it was not exactly a waste. Chapter 107. Sumeru Ring Luhong said, "Qingshan is cultivating. Don't disturb him." Yensong said, "Xiaolong, you need to cultivate properly too. Although you don't have the talent to directly practice qi, as long as you break through to the innate realm, your inner force can be converted into true qi. It'll be very easy for you to break through to the 2nd layer. You won't necessarily lose to others." After Li Qingshan finished off Hall Chief Wu, Lu Hong begged Yensong to take Li Long to the headquarters of the Iron Fist in Clear River City. If that were not the case, Lu Hong would not have spent so much money to curry favor with Yensong. Li Long said politely, "Yes, Protector." The 3 of them gazed at the door of the room. They all had different thoughts. The rooster crowed, and the world turned white. Only after an entire night did Li Qingshan open his eyes. He silently sensed the true qi flowing through his body and felt delighted. He had finally completed the 1st layer of the innate method of practicing qi. However, this did not mean he could complete the cultivation method easily. The higher one progressed with any cultivation method, the more difficult it would be. The amount of time and effort required would increase exponentially as well. It was a pity that he had already eaten all the unknown pills Xianyue had given him. Otherwise, he was confident he could complete the first 3 layers of the innate method of practicing qi with just a single one. He could even clear the Yang-Heal meridian and break through to the 2nd layer. The path of cultivation was still the same: wealth, companionship, method, and place. Wealth came first, but the wealth here was not gold or silver, but spiritual pills and immortal herbs. No matter what kind of ability or cultivation method he practiced, it was essentially a process of gathering spiritual qi. If he wanted to practice martial arts, he needed to have a full stomach. If he wanted to cultivate, he needed to eat the bait. External pills were indispensable. Although a person's talent and ability to comprehend were very important, it was impossible for his cultivation to increase drastically as soon as he comprehended it, unless he had already accumulated a lot beforehand. However, even if it was weak, it was still very important to him. He took out the cursive sword calligraphy and injected his true qi into it. Sure enough, the cursive sword calligraphy accepted his true qi. Although he couldn't even draw a single stroke in the end, it was still a great encouragement to him. This meant that the talismans on him could be activated and used. The biggest difference between humans and animals was how they made and used tools. Demons strengthened themselves, while humans relied on external objects. If one could not directly absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, one would have to concoct pills and medicines. If one did not have a strong body, one would have to craft spiritual artifacts and talismans. This was the strength of humans. Li Qingshan wanted to use this advantage as much as he could. Moreover, if he wanted to open the Soaring Dragon Elder's Sumeru ring, he needed this power. He meditated for a while to recover the true qi he had consumed. Zhang Xian took out the ring and wore it on his middle finger before infusing his jinqi into it. Even though he knew that it was impossible for him to open it, he still had to give it a try. Li Qingshan's genuine qi flowed into the ring like water, circled around the ring, and flowed back into Li Qingshan's body. Of course, the ring didn't show any signs of opening, but what made him dumbfounded was that the innate qi he had painstakingly cultivated was reduced by more than half in the blink of an eye. It wasn't like the cursive sword calligraphy, which could be recovered after being used up. Instead, he had lost his cultivation. He had once again been forcefully kicked out of the first realm of the innate method of training of qi. However, the remaining true qi had become extremely pure, like a muddy river turning into a clear stream. Even though the quantity had decreased, the quality had greatly increased, and the speed at which it circulated had also increased. Moreover, the more impure one's true qi was, the harder it was to make breakthroughs. It was very easy to get stuck at a bottleneck. Many qi practitioners had to put in a lot of effort to make breakthroughs, like forging iron, slowly refining their true qi. However, this Sumeru ring had directly refined the impure iron into fine steel. He didn't need to spend any time or effort. It was a treasure that countless qi practitioners, and even cultivators of higher realms, dreamed of. Li Qingshan hadn't expected the Sumeru ring to have such a function other than storage. This could be considered a good thing. However, Li Qingshan smiled bitterly. Was it easy for him to painstakingly cultivate a bit of true qi? Not only did he have to be exploited by the Yao core, but he also had to go through the refinement of the ring. It was simply killing him. He felt as if he had gone through decades of hard work, only to be liberated overnight. Li Qingshan sighed heavily. He knew this was the correct choice. If he wasted a little more time now, he could save a lot of time in the future. Most people did not waste their time on cultivation. Instead, they were stuck at bottlenecks, unable to advance any further. Just like Protector Yen, who had reached the second level of qi cultivation long ago, but couldn't break through to the third level no matter what. He was stuck at this stage for so many years. Even though he wanted to refine true qi, he was completely powerless. The true qi that was transformed from inner force was simply too impure. Li Qingshan closed his eyes and began to cultivate again. This time, he didn't take off the ring. Yen Song had already chosen his disciples and was ready to set off. However, he waited until late at night and still didn't see Li Qingshan come out. He knocked on the door several times, but no one answered. Lu Hong said, "Could it be that something happened?" However, he thought to himself, did Protector Yen purposefully give me a problematic method of practicing qi to drive Li Qingshan into qi deviation? Yen Song frowned. He had no idea why either. If it were not for the fact that he could hear Li Qingshan's extremely slow and steady breathing in the training room, he would have suspected that Li Qingshan had died from qi deviation. Practicing qi was the same as doing other things. It was about a proper balance between work and rest. It was not just about wasting time. Otherwise, not only would it be pointless, but it would even be harmful. He did not remind Li Qingshan of this, as he could comprehend this during the process of cultivation. As time went on, the effects of practicing qi would worsen, and his mind would become more and more exhausted and anxious. Moreover, true qi was extracted from the body's origin, so it needed to be replenished through food and drink. Otherwise, it would be like water without a source, a tree without roots. Li Qingshan had indeed encountered this problem, but he switched to practicing the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression. The spirit turtle sank into the depths of the sea and slumbered for 1,000 years, but it constantly inhaled and exhaled the spiritual qi of the world. To Li Qingshan, meditating was not something that exhausted him. Instead, it was more like sleeping and resting. With a flash of inspiration, he began practicing the innate method of practicing qi again. In the beginning, it was extremely difficult. He would break out of his meditative state with the slightest carelessness, and his cultivation of the spirit turtle's method of qi suppression came to a halt. However, gradually he grasped the trick, turning the spirit turtle's method of qi suppression into an instinct. It was like breathing constantly even when he was asleep. This was not because Li Qingshan was clever, but because the ability was just too profound. It had completely exceeded his imagination. Afterwards, he would practice the innate method of practicing qi in a dreamlike state. The two abilities that belonged to demons and humans circulated through his body at the same time. Li Qingshan discovered that under this state, the demon core was not as greedy for true qi as before. It could give him more of the fruits of his labor. Under this state, his cultivation speed of the innate method of practicing qi reached an unprecedented peak. With how powerful his body was, going without food or drink for a few days was nothing to him. For 3 whole days and nights, Li Qingshan did not sleep or rest. He did not eat or drink. He was completely submerged in cultivation. Finally, he opened his eyes again. He had forcefully returned the innate method of practicing qi to the first layer. He let out a long sigh. He felt incredibly hungry, so he took out the cursive sword calligraphy and poured his incomparably pure true qi into it. Before his true qi ran out, one of the strokes lit up, and a beam of sword qi shot out. Just now, it was like he had tossed wet logs into a furnace. It was very difficult for him to ignite the flames, but what he was using right now was high-grade charcoal. It was easily ignited, providing him with large amounts of heat. The 2 Iron Fist disciples standing guard outside the door suddenly felt a chill run down their spines. They looked at each other and said, "Don't you feel a little cold?" Li Qingshan put away the cursive sword calligraphy and took off his spatial ring, hanging it on his chest again. He then stood up and opened the door. The sunlight was blinding. "Young hero Li, you're finally out," one of the Iron Fist disciples said while the other hurried to pass on the message. Not long after, Yen Song and Lu Hong rushed over. Lu Hong said, "Qingshan, you're finally out? I thought something happened to you and wanted to break in a few times." Li Qingshan smiled and said, "I'm sorry, the technique that Protector Yen gave me is too profound. I was so engrossed in comprehending it that I lost track of time." Protector Yen said, "Are you really refining qi? What layer are you at?" Li Qingshan said, "I just reached the first layer." Yen Song said, "That's not slow. But it definitely wasn't fast." The first layer of the innate training of qi was the easiest. He had personally seen a talented child master the first layer in 4 hours. Of course, Li Qingshan couldn't be considered fast. But it was unheard of to use 3 days for the first time to refine qi. Li Qingshan said, "I've made everyone wait for a long time. Can we set off now?" Lu Hong took out a stack of banknotes and handed it to Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan was originally here to collect debts. Li Qingshan said, "Sect leader Lu, you're looking down on me. Protector Yen is so generous. I'm not a stingy person. Don't mention money again." He never wanted to owe anyone anything in his life. Only when he felt that he didn't owe anyone could he be at ease. Although the innate training of qi was not an impressive collection of abilities, it was extremely important to him. It would be better if he could obtain it as soon as possible. Lu Hong rejoiced inside. He obviously could not make Yen Song hand over the money he had given him. This was his retirement savings. Yen Song admired him as well. He did not take 10,000 taels of silver seriously as he chatted. If he were the young master of a wealthy clan, it would have been nothing, but a young man from the mountains like him was far too rare. This child was born with an extraordinary bearing. It was no wonder that people would appreciate him. Only after a few rounds of refusal did Li Qingshan accept the 2,000 taels of silver as his traveling expenses. When Li Qingshan arrived outside the Iron Fist School, he saw that the Iron Fist School that had always been quiet was currently filled with a cacophony of gongs, drums, and firecrackers. There were even groups of dragon and lion dancers, completely surrounding the Iron Fist School. Of course, it was not to send Li Qingshan off. For children with reddened eyes were delivered before Yen Song. They were the children that had been chosen. They had the opportunity to leave this tiny Qingyang city and enter an even vaster world, but at the same time, they would have to leave their homes and distance themselves from their families. Li Qingshan watched on from one side with his arms crossed. Suddenly, he heard someone call his name. Turning around, he saw village head Li and caretaker Lu in the crowd as well. Beside them were the two brothers, Li Hu and Li Bao, with a few villagers from the Crouching Ox village behind them. Chapter 108. Away from home, Li Qingshan said, "Have you come to see off Li Long?" Caretaker Lu said, "We've also come to see you off. Qingshan, you've really grown up. Don't take what happened back then to heart." The current Li Qingshan had already become an unreachable figure in his eyes. He could not even speak properly. The other villagers all squeezed over to congratulate him. They all carried local produce and shoved it into Li Qingshan's hands. Li Qingshan looked at these familiar faces and sighed emotionally. He had no idea where to start. The Crouching Ox village that he had always wanted to leave since he was young suddenly appeared before him with great clarity. Every single house, every single blade of grass was vivid in his mind. The deep well that had trapped him for over a decade, the mud and moss that he had always wanted to leap out of, the mud and moss that he had grown tired of, all became familiar in that moment. Village head Li hugged Li Long and wept. The scene was noisy and chaotic, but when it reached Li Qingshan's ears, it suddenly fell silent. Li Qingshan even discovered elder brother Li and sister-in-law Li in the crowd. They were cowering, hiding from the nobles in the city. They looked at Li Qingshan, as if they wanted to go up, but they were also afraid. At that moment, they were filled with regret. If they had not fallen out with Li Erlang, who knew how much glory they would be able to bask in right now? When they saw Li Qingshan look at them, their eyes all erupted with the light of hope. However, Li Qingshan immediately looked away. What needed to be done had already been done. What was done could not be undone. It was not that they could not let it go, but they were already in a completely different world. Moreover, they had no idea that being his family was even more likely to die a violent death than being rich and powerful. With Yen Song's order, everyone moved to the sides. A large carriage with 2 horses was driven over. Every single horse was extremely spirited. Li Qingshan, Protector Yen, Li Long, and the 4 children boarded the carriage together. The carriage moved slowly until it stopped in front of the county government office. Yi Dechuan and the advisor happily boarded the carriage. With the protection of these experts, there wouldn't be any danger on the road. When Li Qingshan saw the item in Yi Dechuan's hands, his eyes lit up. Stone splitter bow. He had left the bow in the courtyard in Qingyang City. After he returned, he had gone to take a look. The courtyard had already been cleaned up, and a new resident had moved in. Obviously, he had no idea where the stone splitter bow had gone. He did not try to look for it either, so he never thought it would end up in Yi Dechuan's hands. He pulled the bowstring lightly with his index finger. With his current strength, it was not a problem for him to shoot 100 arrows consecutively. In a pavilion 5 kilometers away from the city, Li Qingshan once again met the owner of the stone splitter bow. Huang Bingge said, "Congratulations, Qingshan. Your strength has improved again." He found that he could no longer see through this young man's strength. However, he was well informed. The only person who could defeat a Xiantian master head-on was another Xiantian master. He really did what he said in the past, and it only took him a few months. Li Qingshan smiled. "Hunting chief, you haven't wasted your time." He could tell that Huang Bingge was already infinitely close to the level of first-rate masters right now. After drinking a few cups of farewell wine, he set off once again. Finally, he completely left Qingyang City behind, no longer in sight. Li Qingshan thought to himself, home. He had already understood that whether he would die in the dust or ascend to the heavens, he would never return. From today onwards, wherever he went would be his home. He traveled by day and rested at night. After traveling in the mountains for 3 days, his field of vision suddenly widened. A vast plain unfurled before Li Qingshan's eyes. The golden fields of wheat stretched as far as the eye could see, kicking up waves of wheat in the summer wind. Villages and towns dotted the landscape, with smoke rising from their chimneys. It was very different from the crouching ox village. Yensong said, "We've left the range of Qingyang City now. In another 3 or 5 days, we'll arrive at the ferry crossing, and then we'll be able to change boats and travel directly to Jiaping City or even the Clear River Prefecture." Li Qingshan took out the map Gu Yenying had given him. With a thought, a speck of light lit up. The ferry crossing was only a few dozen kilometers away from here. Yensong said in surprise, "A mental map, and a mental map of the Green Province at that. That's quite valuable. Qingshan, where did you get it from?" Generally speaking, the larger the area covered by a map, the rougher it would be, and the smaller the map, the more detailed it would be. However, a mental map was able to cover 10,000 li while also being extremely detailed. Although it was only a low-grade spiritual tool, it was still very precious, let alone a mental map that encompassed the entire Qing province. Li Qingshan suddenly said, "Protector Yen, Sir Yi, let's part ways here." Over the past few days, he had already gained a rough understanding of the Jianghu and this world from the two of them. At the very least, it was the information they knew, so he would no longer be clueless when he ventured out. Yidachuan said, "What? You're not coming with us?" Li Qingshan shook his head. "I plan on traveling alone. I'm really sorry for making you wait for me for 3 days." The reason why he chose to set off with them was probably due to some sort of fear. A person who had not left the village for over a decade suddenly had to go to the outside world, to a so-called big city. He would always feel slightly fearful, even relying on these two people who were not even as powerful as him, just so they could look out for each other along the way. Everyone desired to roam the world. They all desired freedom. However, when a vast world of freedom truly appeared before them, everyone would feel fear and at a loss for what to do. Li Qingshan was no different. But now, it was time to cast these emotions aside. When he left the overlapping mountains and looked at the vast plains, the dazzling golden wheat fields, the clear trickling river, and the faint handwriting on the map were reflected in front of his eyes. It was so beautiful and vivid, but his footprints had not even covered 1/10,000th of the map. The few of them looked at each other, not knowing how to persuade him. Suddenly, they heard Li Qingshan spread his arms and said to the vast plains, "I want to travel through the 5 lakes and 4 seas, the 9 provinces of the world. I want to taste all the delicacies in the world, drink all the fine wine in the world, cultivate the fiercest magical powers, fight the strongest enemies, sleep with the most beautiful women. The world, here I come, ha." His voice went from low to high, his laughter like thunder. What he said was a somewhat silly declaration. Was it silly? Perhaps. The bull who heard him say these silly words was no longer here, but he also did not need to ask anyone, "Can my dream come true?" He did not need anyone else's answer. He did not need anyone else's approval. Of course, he did not care about what others thought of him either. The answer was already in his heart. After agreeing to meet again in Jiaping City, the people on the hillside watched as the tall figure left. They watched as he melted into the golden plains. He rolled around in the wheat fields like a big child, quickly disappearing without a trace. Originally, it was a rather childish and laughable act, but they all thought of a few phrases at the same time. A dragon swims through the ocean, a tiger enters the mountains. Li Qingshan did not follow the main road. Instead, he sprinted through the wilderness and arrived at a tiny dot on the map very soon. It was a city that was much more prosperous than Qingyang City. They did not waste any effort to remember its name. Instead, they directly rushed to the largest restaurant in the city, booking a table with the best scenery and ordering the best banquet. Every single dish was a specialty of the region. Not only had he not eaten many of them before, but he had never even heard of them before. Every single jar of alcohol was aged for 20 years. Although it was not as good as spiritual alcohol, it still had its own taste. The manager saw that he was a major customer and personally received him. After drinking a few cups with him, he suddenly smiled. Drinking alone is tasteless. Young master, would you like the company of a few beauties? He treated Li Qingshan as a wastrel who had managed to escape from his clan after so much difficulty. Li Qingshan was taken aback at first before smiling. I do. Why wouldn't I? I have plenty of money. He was like the most vulgar nouveau riche. He wanted to work hard on cultivation and venture beyond the 9 heavens, but he did not plan on becoming an ascetic monk. He had sworn to marry a woman like Gu Yenying, but before he actually swore to marry a woman, he did not plan on becoming an ascetic monk. Living in this world would never be a painful thing, or he would be better off dead. These distant dreams were planting seeds of hope in his heart, not torturing himself instead. As a result, over a dozen gorgeously dressed women in heavy makeup sat beside him and chatted with him with giggles. They constantly referred to him as Sir and Young Master. Some of them even extended their hands boldly into his bosom. At first, Li Qingshan felt rather uneasy as he was teased by a few women in the brothel, but he relaxed very soon. He hugged them without a care as he smiled from ear to ear. However, his gaze remained as clear as water the entire time, like a child playing an extremely novel game. However, it was easy for children to get bored. He did not really plan on doing anything. It was not that he disliked these women in the brothel, but after seeing Gu Yenying and Shen Yue, who were peerless beauties, it was easy for him to get tired of this kind of game. He did not understand in the past, but now he knew what it meant to look back and smile charms 100 women, and all the women in the 6 palaces are colorless. Bang! Suddenly, someone slammed open the door and shouted, "Lower your voice." It was a young master dressed in luxurious clothes, carrying a treasured sword, and wearing a crown on his head. He shouted at Li Qingshan. As the saying goes, 3 women make a play. It was inevitable that the table where they drank wine would be extremely noisy. Behind this young master stood a beautiful woman. She looked at Li Qingshan with disgust. Li Qingshan placed his index finger on his lips and made a long shu sound. Then he yawned and stood up. He casually took out the banknotes on his body and placed them on the table. The group of brothel women immediately ignored him and fought over the banknotes. Li Qingshan walked to the side of the young master and sized him up. The young master placed his hand on the hilt of his sword. Although he was arrogant, he had the right to be arrogant. Li Qingshan could see that he was already a Khanate expert. No, he should be a talented Qi practitioner. The woman behind him was the same. The 2 Qi practitioners naturally had the right to be arrogant. In their eyes, Li Qingshan was just an ordinary hedonistic son of rich parents. It was not a big deal for them to kill him with a single sword strike. Chapter 109. A demon's visit. Li Qingshan said, "Please make way." Afterwards, he squeezed past the young master and gazed deeply at the scholar. He shook his head gently. She was a beauty. In his past life, he probably would not even be able to make a beauty smile even if he used everything he had. However, his target was much higher now. The sacred hall was a small joy for him to dream about. He walked past her and took in her fragrance. Dreams made people happy. The woman frowned even more. Perhaps it was because of Li Qingshan's rouge, or because of Li Qingshan's fearless gaze. Perhaps his final shake of the head had infuriated her the most. The young master was just about to draw his sword, but the woman shook her head and allowed Li Qingshan to go downstairs. Disdain filled her eyes. Li Qingshan did not leap up and fight back immediately like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, even though he definitely possessed the strength to do so. He discovered that as long as he could hold back for a moment, he could save himself a lot of trouble. Of course, he did not get angry. However, the person who avoided trouble now wanted to take the initiative to cause trouble for others. He made his way downstairs and shook off the rouge on him. He wanted to experience it. Now that he had experienced it, he did not care at all. He knocked the jar on his waist. "Little and let's go kill a few bad people." The reason why he had chosen to part ways with Protector Yen and the others was not as simple as drinking with women. The jar thumped in response. Li Qingshan sniggered and strode away, making his way into the dark alleyway. Only when he entered the darkness did he feel the gaze behind him vanish completely. "Rongji, is there a problem?" The scholar called Rongji said. "I saw that his steps were steady. He seemed to have practiced martial arts before." "It's just some external martial arts at most. If you hadn't stopped me, I definitely would have taught him a lesson. He's just a nobody. Even if we kill him, we'll just dirty our hands. Is there a need for that? Let's eat quickly and hurry up tomorrow so that we can get to Jiaping City as soon as possible." 7 asterisk, yes. It's rare for the Eagle Guard to recruit new guards. We absolutely can't miss this opportunity. The man's eyes burned with passion. As long as he joined the Hawkwolf Guard, he would be able to completely separate himself from the Jianghu and rise above all. No one could resist the temptation, so he was even more determined to obtain this position. I'm afraid it won't be that simple. This time, all of the experts within 500 kilometers of Jiaping City will be attracted over. There will even be experts in the 3rd or 4th layer of Qi refining appearing. However, the number of spots is limited, so there will be a lot of fighting. Don't worry. With those talismans as our trump cards, even if we encounter an expert, we can still turn defeat into victory. The man was full of confidence and quickly cast aside Li Qingshan. Yes, Li Qingshan was just a small fry. However, unbeknownst to them, their conversation reached Li Qingshan's ears clearly. His hearing had reached the level of demons a long time ago. As long as he paid attention, he could clearly hear the voices from 5 kilometers away. The Hawkwolf Guard had actually begun recruiting people. Perhaps it was even a spot left behind by Feng Zhang's death. Probably even Wang Puxi never imagined that he would be able to make it out alive and truly fill the spot. As for whether his appearance would disappoint these people, he obviously did not care. He did not have too much time to think about it right now either. That was because a few black figures had already blocked him in the alleyway. They gathered around him with ugly expressions. The small city was rather prosperous, but there were not a lot of outsiders, and there were even fewer people as high-profile as Li Qingshan. The news of a teenager in his teens carrying a large amount of money spread very quickly, yet he was actually bold enough to enter this world of darkness. If they did not rob him, it would be far too unjustifiable. Li Qingshan said softly, "You're pretty lucky." He knocked the jar. "Time to eat. Hand over the money." One of them drew a shiny dagger, but what he received in response was an even brighter blood flames of corpse incineration. There was basically no sound at all. The flames swallowed the people, and their flesh and blood turned into pure energy, merging with the flames. A lantern lit up the darkness, illuminating a wonton stall guarded by an old man. Although there was no business, only moths lingering around, it still managed to hold on with some difficulty. A young man strode over and called out, "Sir, please give me a bowl of wontons." "All right." The old man began to move quickly, and the wontons floated in the clear water very soon. "It's already so late, so why aren't you resting? At your age, it's time for you to enjoy your old age." Li Qingshan began to chat casually. The old man sighed and grumbled. It was all because his children were unfilial, and he and his wife had nothing to live for. These were the most common, miserable things in the world. Li Qingshan sat by the stall and ate the wontons as he comforted the old man with a smile. Sitting alone in a dark corner and eating the simplest food, facing an old man who had gone through many hardships, actually felt much better than drinking wine. It was quite strange. "Brother, you're not a local, so I'll give you a piece of advice. You better return to the inn after you finish eating. It's not peaceful here at night." Li Qingshan said, "Could it be that there are bad people here?" Then he heard more complaints and complaints. There was no lack of such things in any place. There were brothels who forced women into prostitution, unscrupulous merchants who gave usurious loans, and gangs who bullied the weak. Li Qingshan listened quietly and memorized everything. He casually inquired about the names and addresses of these people. After eating 4 or 5 bowls of wontons, Li Qingshan left all the money he had just obtained from the thieves and got up to leave. "This is too much." The old man was shocked. He raised his head, but there was no trace of Li Qingshan. A gust of night wind blew, and he thought of the stories of demons and ghosts that he had heard before. He decided to pack up his stall now. Tonight, there were demons and ghosts who came to his doorstep to help the weak and get rid of the evil. There was no such thing as evil magic in the world, only evil people. If he killed all the evil people in the world, it would be a great benevolence. Before the sun rose, Xianxia had already left the small town. In the wilderness, he practiced the ox demon's fist of great strength. Last night, he killed more than 10 people in a row. His chest was free and clear, and his fists were like beating drums, breaking through the air. Xiao refined the essence blood of over a dozen people on one side. The blood flames of corpse incineration surged around him, turning into various shapes, such as vicious beasts or venomous snakes. In the end, it actually formed a lotus pedestal, lifting him up. He soared through the wilderness, sometimes ascending and sometimes descending. He was impressive. Wherever he passed by, the lush grass would immediately wither and die, leaving behind a trail of death on the ground. If Little N wanted to kill a second-layer Qi practitioner like Yen Song, it would be as easy as pie. Xianxia felt both admiration and admiration. Right now, his strength was only greater than Little N's, but he could not fly either. However, Little N was nowhere close to the level where he could recondense his flesh and blood. The path of white bone and great beauty was terrifyingly powerful, but it was difficult to practice. It required even more blood sacrifices. Although he did not purposefully collect wealth from the massacre last night, Xianxia's wealth still easily reached several tens of thousand taels. If those people were wolves that ate sheep, then he was a tiger that ate wolves. Suddenly, he discovered that to Qi practitioners, the currency of the human world was no longer particularly meaningful, as they possessed strength that surpassed ordinary people. As a result, even through the most basic methods of plundering, they could easily obtain wealth that ordinary people would never be able to obtain in their entire lives. To Qi practitioners, the true treasures were the pills and spiritual stones that could increase their cultivation. However, it was obvious that these resources were in the hands of powerful organizations. Ordinary people would probably never even hear about them in their entire lives. If he wanted to come into contact with these things, joining the Hawkwolf Guard was the best choice. He called Little and set off once again. Regardless of day or night, he traveled whenever he wanted and stopped whenever he wanted. He destroyed 2 or 3 nests of bandits along the way. After 3 days, he finally arrived before a large river and stopped. This river was the Clear River, which was also the origin of the Clear River Prefecture. It stretched for several thousand kilometers, reaching all the way to Clear River City. The surface of the river spanned over 10 kilometers. Even with both of his lives combined, he had never seen a river like this before. As he gazed at the vast ripples, his mind immediately widened. Xianxia arrived in a large town by the river. It was called the town of Sichuan, originally developed from the ferry crossing. Although it was only a town, it was even more bustling than Qingyang City. As he rode on a horse, he saw that the streets were packed with people, bustling with activity. Suddenly, a thought crossed his mind. If he killed all of these people, would he be able to refine Little N's flesh and blood immediately? Afterwards, he shook his head. Wouldn't that make him a homicidal maniac? There were countless boats on the banks of the river, and people came and went from the docks. It was extremely busy. There were obviously plenty of passenger boats heading south too. Xianxia actually saw a huge dragon boat that stood several stories tall. The boat was richly decorated, like a luxurious restaurant that floated on the water. He immediately dismissed the thought of hiring a small boat and boarded a huge dragon boat. The rooms on the highest floor of the dragon boat had the best scenery, as well as the most expensive. They actually cost several thousand taels of silver. Xianxia obviously did not lack silver. He took out a few silver notes, and the caretaker immediately smiled from ear to ear. She ordered a female servant to lead him to the room on the highest floor. Before she left, she even hinted to him in a rather ambiguous manner that he could call her if he needed anything. The room was extremely spacious. Even if it could hold several dozen people, it probably would not be crowded. The decor was even more luxurious than the best in Li Qingshan had stayed in along the way. He opened the window and overlooked the port and the town of Sheng. He wondered when Yen Song and the others would arrive, but he saw two familiar people on the docks. They were the man and woman he had encountered in the restaurant 3 days ago. What? The rooms on the highest floor are already full. You want us to stay below? The man said in displeasure. The caretaker said in a troubled manner, there really is no other way. Young master, the second floor is very luxurious too, so please make do with it. How could people who could spend several thousand taels of silver on a boat lack money? Even if you gave them several tens of thousand taels of silver, they would not be willing to lose face. The woman said, we have never had the habit of making do in our lives. Caretaker, please think of another way. Money is not a problem. The man frowned and raised his head. He saw Li Qingshan. Chapter 110. Counterattack at night. The two of them appeared in front of Li Qingshan again. The man didn't waste any time and threw a stack of banknotes in front of Li Qingshan. Take the money and go downstairs. Li Qingshan slapped the banknote on the man's hand. You should ask someone else. The woman stopped the man who was about to lose his temper and introduced with a smile. I'm Qian Rongji, and this is my brother, Qian Rongming. The manager exclaimed and interrupted. Could the two of you be from Ancient Wind City's Qian clan? Ancient Wind City was a rather large city, and he was a person who traveled all over the world on ships. How could he not have heard of large clans that could cultivate qi practitioners? Qian Rongming snorted arrogantly, while Qian Rongji nodded in a reserved manner. She continued to say to Li Qingshan, I'd advise you to accept it. When my elder brother loses his temper, he'll kill people. Since she was born in a big family, she had to pay attention to the appearance of a big family. She could not lose her elegance at any time. She preferred to subdue the enemy without fighting. Li Qingshan folded his arms and said, Is that so? Then I'd like to see it for myself. This was the second time someone had bullied him, so his tolerance was limited. Qian Rongji's expression changed slightly. She came from a great clan, and she was born with the talent to train in qi. She was also very beautiful, and she had the reputation of being the #1 beauty in Ancient Wind City. She could be called a proud daughter of heaven. Ever since she was young, as long as she opened her mouth, there was nothing she couldn't do. Especially those stinky men, they were even more willing to work like cows and horses for her. There was never a time when they were rejected. Compared to the self-restraint on the surface, the arrogance in her bones was much stronger than that of her brother, Qian Rongming. She said coldly, It looks like you are refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. I've always been fond of drinking. I'm willing to give it a try even if it's a toast or a forfeit. Li Qingshan looked at her face seriously, watching how a young lady's expression changed, as if he was watching some kind of magical performance. Qian Rongji took a deep breath and took a step back. She said calmly, You're just a Jianghu person who has practiced some hard body skills. How dare you act so arrogantly in front of a qi practitioner? Such an idiot was unnecessary in this world, so there was no harm in killing him. Qian Rongming laughed sinisterly as he walked forward. The manager sighed and was prepared to have someone collect the corpse. It was not wise to clash with the Qian clan directly. What Ancient Wind City's Qian clan? Is it that amazing? At this moment, a voice suddenly rang out. Everyone turned around and saw a man in his 30s walking out of the room. He wasn't tall and had a pair of slanted eyes on his tanned face. He looked at them with contempt. What are you? Qian Rongming furiously stepped forward, but he was pulled back by Qian Rongji. She looked over warily. May I ask who you are? What does that mean? Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. Another qi practitioner, and an expert at the 3rd level at that. No wonder he dared to look down on this pair of brother and sister who were only at the 2nd level. The dark-skinned man sneered, With just the two of you, you're nowhere close to becoming Hawkwolf guards. Why waste time going to Jiaping City? Hurry up and disembark and go home. Only then did Li Qingshan understand that this person was not standing up for him. He had come for the limited spots in the Hawkwolf Guard. He saw through the intentions of the siblings, which was why he had spoken up beforehand to deal a blow to his opponent. Qian Rongming and Qian Rongji glanced at one another. Although there was a slight difference in strength, they still stood a chance if they worked together. However, they would have to use up their precious talismans, and they would lose the opportunity to join the Hawkwolf Guard. Just you wait. After a moment of hesitation, they left behind a vicious threat before leaving in a hurry. However, they did not just say that to the skinny man. They even glared viciously at Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan said, "Thank you for helping me out. May I ask for your name, brother?" "Kid, don't think you can mess around just because you have some money. There are far too many people in this world that you can't afford to offend. I'd advise you to disembark immediately," the man said coldly before slamming the door shut. Li Qingshan shrugged. This was the treatment of the weak. 7*. The ship moved slowly, breaking through the waves on the gentle surface of the river and flowing downstream, heading towards Jiaping City. There were only a few rooms on the very top floor of the ship. The doors were all tightly shut. Only Li Qingshan paced around on the deck, admiring the open scenery on the two banks. It was too much for his eyes to take in, so he immediately cast aside the matter of just now. The ship sailed into the night. Li Qingshan was currently meditating and practicing in his room. He currently possessed 4 cultivation methods: the Ox Demon's Fist of Great Strength, the Tiger Demon's Fist of Bone Forging, the Spirit Turtle's method of Sea Suppression, and the innate method of practicing Qi. They all had 9 layers, and he was currently at the first layer. The former was a demon's ability, so the further he progressed, the more difficult it became to practice. The time it took to practice increased exponentially too. On the other hand, the innate method of practicing Qi progressed much faster because it was a human cultivation method of the lowest grade. In order to obtain the items in the Sumeru ring, Li Qingshan had devoted a lot of effort into it. With his powerful body, the rate at which he refined vitality into Qi was startling as well. After a few days, he was already close to the second layer. Little and did not continue practicing. Instead, he crouched in a corner of the room, reading a book. There were 2 bookshelves in the room. They contained many leisure books like poems and songs, as well as a few common Buddhist scriptures. Little and was reading a Buddhist scripture. Although the eminent monk who had attained enlightenment had entered the demonic path, and the path of white bone and great beauty was also an ability of the demonic path, it had essentially evolved from the Buddhist Dharma, so he obviously had to pay attention and comprehend it. The blood-red flames in his eye sockets illuminated the words in the book. It was a rather strange sight. Suddenly he raised his head. Li Qingshan opened his eyes as well and gazed at the door. They could both sense it. One was using his senses for living beings, while the other was using his 6 senses that were as powerful as those of demons. A figure silently climbed onto the highest floor of the dragon ship and arrived outside Li Qingshan's door. Killing intent filled his eyes. Qian Rongming was certain that he had not made a single sound or given off a sliver of his aura. Obviously, he was not worried about Li Qingshan. Instead, he was guarding against the Qi practitioner next door. Tonight, all he wanted to do was kill Li Qingshan. He thought viciously inside that he should have killed him the first time they met. As for the Qi practitioner next door, he had already made up his mind. He would definitely use his trump card to teach him a lesson during the competition with the Hawkwolf Guard, or it would not be too late to seek revenge after he became a Hawkwolf Guard. On the other side of Li Qingshan, the dark-skinned man's heart skipped a beat. He also sensed something, but he had no intentions of taking action. In his eyes, Li Qingshan was just an insignificant figure, and he had ignorantly stood up against a Qi practitioner. He did not even listen to his advice. Even if he died, he deserved it. He was considering whether he could use this matter to his advantage and kill Qian Rongming while he was alone. The people of the Qian family of ancient Wind City should possess some good items on them. Afterwards, he would go below and kill Qian Rongji, which would increase his chances of success. The corner of his lips curled up slightly, and he stood up silently. The door opened slightly, and Qian Rongming entered with a flash. He gazed at Li Qingshan on the bed and raised his right hand. Circulating his true qi, he struck out with his palm. There was a thump, and Qian Rongming smiled in delight. "What are you smiling about?" Li Qingshan suddenly opened his eyes, and they shone with red light. Qian Rongming was shocked. His muscles tensed up, about to launch a series of attacks, but his body relaxed again. He stared at his chest in disbelief. The tip of a sword had pierced his heart. He struggled to believe that he had been ambushed. Even more terrifyingly, even now, he had not sensed the existence of anyone behind him. Unless that person did not breathe or their heart did not beat, they would not be breathing at all. Afterwards, he turned around with difficulty and saw the final scene of his life. A skeleton with burning pupils. The blood flames of corpse incineration spread through his entire body, turning him into a part of the flames. It was not because Qian Rongming was too weak or careless, but because Little N's current strength was at the third or fourth layer at the very least. Under the absolute suppression of strength and a sneak attack, it would be strange if he did not kill him in a single strike. Li Qingshan sighed gently. "It was just a disagreement. Did you really have to reach the point of killing me? Are you too arrogant, or am I too low-key?" That day in the restaurant, Li Qingshan already had the strength to kill him, but he did not do so. It was not that he was afraid of trouble, but he did not want to kill indiscriminately. Those who killed because of a disagreement were just ordinary people. If Li Qingshan wanted to kill, he had to do it in a reasonable manner. However, others might not think so. Perhaps in their eyes, all living beings were like ants. Of course, they could step on them whenever they wanted. He casually checked the spoils of war, but he did not find the talismans or medicinal pills that he had imagined. Instead, he found a black brocade pouch. It looked a little familiar, but it was worn out and dull. Many of its legs were broken. It really did not match with a young master like Qian Rongming. Li Qingshan's heart moved. He poured the meager spiritual qi in his body into the brocade pouch. Suddenly, a mysterious space opened up in his consciousness. He seemed to see a virtual little box with all kinds of things inside. There was naturally no lack of silver notes, but there were also a few small bottles and a few talismans. With a thought, the things inside appeared in his hand. Li Qingshan was overjoyed. So this was the legendary 100 Treasures pouch. In the past few days, he had asked Yen Song about a lot of Qi practitioners' general knowledge. He knew that the Sumeru ring was something that only truly powerful cultivators could possess. The space inside was extremely vast. As for how vast it was, he had only heard of it but had never seen it. It was rare for a normal Qi practitioner to have 100 treasures pouch. The reason why he found this brocade pouch familiar was because he had seen it on Wang Pushi of the Red Eagle territory. However, Wang Pushi's 100 treasures pouch was much more beautiful than this one. Presumably, the storage space was also much larger. Without thinking too much, he knew that the one on Qian Rongming's body was a standard substandard item. It could not even store a longer weapon. However, even a substandard 100 treasures pouch was extremely rare. At the very least, Yen Song, a cultivator at the second level of Qi practitioner, did not have one. As expected of someone who came from a so-called family clan. He really had some talent. Li Qingshan checked the things in the 100 treasures pouch. Among the bottles, there was a bottle of healing medicine and 3 bottles of Qi concentration pills. They were not the inferior pills that ordinary people of the Jianghu refined, but real spiritual pills. Of course, compared to the spiritual pills that Xianyue had fed him, they were worlds apart. However, they were real pills for Qi practitioners, and they were exactly what Li Qingshan needed the most right now. Chapter 111. Great River City. The 3 yellow spirit talismans of unknown effects were most likely the trump cards that Qian Rongming had mentioned. Li Qingshan had also learned from Yen Song that spirit talismans were also divided into grades. Although these 3 were also yellow spirit talismans, they were much brighter than the spirit talismans that Li Qingshan had on him. They were at least low grade or mid grade. His eyesight was still not good enough. Holy Church. The spirit talismans and spirit artifacts that ordinary people of the Jianghu could obtain with money were mostly inferior goods. They were made by novices who had just learned how to forge artifacts or create talismans. Even if ordinary people obtained true-grade spirit talismans and spirit artifacts, they would find it difficult to use them. At the very least, if they bit the tip of their tongue and spit out blood, it would be very difficult to activate a low-grade spirit talisman. Finally, he no longer had to carry those miscellaneous items on him. Other than the Sumeru ring, which he could not put into it, Li Qingshan placed all of his possessions into the 100 treasures pouch. He checked his own belongings. Including the silver that Qian Rongming had brought, he had a total of 70 to 80,000 silver notes, several spirit talismans, 3 bottles of qi-gathering pills, and other small items like healing pills. However, other than the Sumeru ring, the most precious thing on him was not these, but a demon core. He had taken it from the rat general in Boundless Mountain. Of course, Xianyue did not think much of it, and had left it for Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan did not know how to use it, and did not dare to eat anything, so he kept it in a small bottle. He took it out to admire it, and then placed it into the 100 treasures pouch. Finally, he put the 100 treasures pouch back into his robes. The feeling of having a great increase in his wealth was really quite good. Li Qingshan's murderous nature was aroused, and he wondered if he should go all out and find that Qian Rongji and cut the weeds by the roots. It had to be said that killing and robbing was addictive. Why did humans incessantly wage war? It was because stealing from others was always much faster than creating for oneself. However, he immediately suppressed this thought. It was not that he was soft-hearted, but that he was worried that if he did this, his murderous nature would be aroused, and he would kill the black-faced man next door as well, taking his things. He definitely had the strength to do so. He didn't even need to release his demonic power. As long as he joined hands with little N, he could do it. On the one hand, the other person had something you wanted, and on the other hand, you had the strength to take it without paying any price. How many people could suppress their greed and desire? Even with the suppression of the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression, his primitive instincts that were no different from those of demons urged him to do this. However, acting on instinct was not the path he wanted. While he was constantly obtaining great power, he was also constantly learning how to control this power so that he wouldn't lose himself. At the same time, he also realized something else. When a person had great power, they would become very terrifying. Qian Rongming probably thought this way. He killed Li Qingshan without paying any price. He could easily breathe a sigh of relief. It was as natural as eating and drinking. The dangers of the cultivation path of the human world were probably even greater than the boundless mountains. Li Qingshan dismissed these stray thoughts. If Qian Rongji did not come to provoke him, then so be it, but if she did, then he would kill her as well. There was no need for him to go through the trouble of looking for her right now. He picked up the bones on the ground with his clothes and made his way to the door, planning to toss them into the river and destroy all evidence. However, as soon as he opened the door, he saw the black-faced man next door staring at him in disbelief. He stared at the bones in his hand. What a coincidence! Li Qingshan was slightly surprised before greeting him with a smile. Afterwards, he made his way around the black-faced man and tossed the bundle into the pitch-black river. He was so relaxed that it was like he was not tossing a corpse, but admiring the night scenery. This was not because his mental fortitude far surpassed ordinary people. Instead, it was because of his fearless composure from his strength. The black-faced man stiffened all over. He clenched and unclenched his fists. His gaze towards Li Qingshan was no longer scornful. Instead, it was filled with caution and even a sliver of fear. He had been waiting in a dark corner outside the door the entire time, ready to launch a sneak attack when the opportunity presented itself. However, the person who emerged from the door was not Qian Rongming, but Li Qingshan, who he thought would definitely die. There was no need to ask who the gloomy, white bones belonged to. However, even if he launched a sneak attack, it would be very difficult for him to kill Li Qingshan in a single strike. That was not a chicken or duck, but a chi practitioner that was 10 times more ferocious than a lion or tiger. He was very tempted to ask how Li Qingshan had done it, but when he saw Li Qingshan smile, he was unable to say anything. Even more terrifyingly, he could not sense the existence of chi on Li Qingshan right now. just like how the unknown was the most terrifying. The sacred church, after successfully tossing the corpse away, Xianxia asked the black-faced man, "What's your name?" The black-faced man no longer showed any disdain. He said carefully, "Diao Fei." He felt like the current Xianxia was slightly different from how he was during the day. This teenager seemed to be hiding something terrifying on him. Of course, it might just be a false impression. Xianxia said, "Are you going to Jiaping City to join the Hawkwolf Guard as well?" What a coincidence. Diao Fei tensed up, ready to deal with any attacks. However, Xianxia clearly had no such plans. He continued, "How many people will the Hawkwolf Guard be recruiting this time?" 3. So few. Diao Fei fell silent. Originally, Xianxia wanted to ask for more information, but when he saw how cautious he was, he shrugged and returned to his room. Diao Fei suddenly asked, "May I ask for your name, sir?" Once he arrived in Jiaping City, this teenager might become a powerful opponent. Xianxia. He felt like he had heard this name somewhere before. Diao Fei thought about it, but he was unable to remember where he had heard it before. He returned to his room as well. Afterwards, he did not sleep for the entire night, remaining vigilant at all times. As soon as Xianxia returned to his room, he sensed something. He opened the window and gazed into the distance. All he saw was a figure leaping off the ship when it was relatively close to the shore. She landed on a sandbank and quickly vanished into the jungle. From the figure, he could tell it was Qian Rongji. Xianxia could not help but sigh. This woman really was quite decisive and cunning. She must have realized something was amiss when Qian Rongming did not return. She did not investigate or question him, directly leaping off the ship and fleeing. Shaking his head and casting this matter aside, Xianxia took out a bottle of qi-gathering pills. He opened it and took a look. There were only 3 in there, and each one was the size of a longan. He took one out and ingested it, beginning to cultivate. As expected, with the assistance of the external pill, his cultivation speed increased slightly. The medicinal effects replenished his true qi, and true qi circulated through his body. As he inhaled and exhaled, time flew. Very soon, a qi-gathering pill was refined in his body. Xianxia took out another qi-gathering pill and ingested it. If other practitioners had seen this, they would have been dumbfounded. Who would eat elixirs like jelly beans? Although external elixirs could greatly increase the speed of cultivation, it did not mean that a person could easily become an expert with elixirs and miraculous elixirs. Talent, hard work, a teacher, and even luck were all indispensable. Furthermore, there was a limit to how many medicinal pills one could take. It was not as simple as eating as much as one could and then converting it all into power. Otherwise, alchemists would all be unparalleled experts. For example, Qian Rongming's 9 qi-gathering pills were originally used for 3 months. One pill was taken every 10 days to slowly refine the medicinal effects. This was when the family valued it more. The normal speed was to take 1 pill every half a month to ensure that the medicinal effects were not wasted. Who would eat it like Xianxia? This was because the medicinal power of a mere qi condensation pill could not possibly remain in his body for more than 10 days. He had to seize every second to convert it into true qi, lest it be plundered by the demonic core and converted into demonic qi. Not a single bit of it would go to waste. Of course, Xianxia did not know this. He was still happily thinking that it was indeed faster to take medicinal pills and cultivate. When he ate the 7th qi-gathering pill, he had successfully cultivated the innate training of qi to the 2nd tier. Because of the Sumeru rings purifying true qi, he did not feel any bottlenecks at all. He stood up. He could feel the extremely pure true qi coursing through his body. His entire body seemed to be much lighter. He put away the remaining 2 qi-gathering pills. With his keen hearing, he heard a commotion coming from afar. The ship was also bustling with noise. He could faintly hear many people saying, "We've arrived at Jiaping City." Xianxia went outside in a hurry to take a look. He saw that the deck below was already filled with people, while the river was blocked by a large mountain and made a turn. After making it around the bend, A majestic city sat between the mountains and rivers, unfolding before Li Qingshan's eyes. More accurately speaking, it could not be called a city, as there were no city walls here. It was closer to a modern city. This was the place where two large rivers met. The Yi River flowed into the Qing River here, and the city of Jiaping was spread out on both sides of the river. Rows upon rows of residences, buildings, pagodas, temples, and Daoist monasteries stretched out endlessly in all directions. Further out were boundless golden fields, and large flocks of birds flew freely under the blue sky above the city. Li Qingshan had never seen an ancient city before, but he believed that the city before him was even more expansive and prosperous than the famous bustling places of ancient times like Hangzhou and Yangzhou. The absence of city walls proved the absolute confidence of the ruler. He did not rely on a piece of earth to protect himself. Only a small city like Qingyang had city walls to stop the attacks of bandits and bandits. Truly large cities did not have city walls. This was a city ruled by Qi practitioners. If there really was an enemy that could pose a threat to the city, it would not be something that could be stopped by a stone wall. Instead, it would affect the development of the city. Li Qingshan finally understood why Yi Dechuan would be so overjoyed when he learned he could become a district magistrate here. Even being a minor official here was far better than being in Qingyang City. Just how prosperous would the prefectural city that ruled over the entire Clear River Prefecture be? He was unable to imagine what the commandery city of Rui would be like. Everything before him made him understand that this was not a simple ancient world. The existence of Qi practitioners deeply influenced everything in this world, making it seem like a legend, shrouded in a wondrous luster. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.